Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Bill Maddox, and I'm talking to you from the Center on Social Innovation and Enterprise at the University of New Hampshire in Durham, New Hampshire. Very excited to launch this 3-webinar series as part of our Living Case Studies Social Sector Franchise Accelerator. Today's webinar is entitled Jibu, Rwanda, Infusing Lessons Learned for Intelligent Scaling. The Living Case Study Social Sector Franchise Accelerator is an action learning and research project taking place over 8 months with entrepreneurs who are new or emerging social sector franchisers. These social sector franchise case subjects receive intensive organizational support, including mentoring with a commercial franchise expert, participating in online learning events, and ongoing support from the Social Sector Franchise Initiative at the University of New Hampshire. I'm really excited today to be able to have our first webinar be focused on Jibu. Jibu is an amazing, fairly young company working in East Africa to provide clean water to a growing number of customers through a growing franchise network. Today, as our guest presenters, we're going to have Galen Welsh. He's a Jibu founder. He's actually co-founder of Jibu. Mark Mutai, the Jibu Uganda country director. Mark has been with Jibu for about 7 months and comes from a background leading multinational carbon finance, social enterprise with a focus on clean energy distribution. Nathan Dowling, who is Jibu's Rwanda country director. He also has a background in clean energy field and work with food for the hungry in Rwanda. And finally, joining us from Houston, Texas, Peter Holt. He's a Jibu mentor from the International Franchise Association Social Sector Task Force and the CEO of the Joint Chiropractic. Welcome, everybody. We are having some connection difficulties, which is something that happens occasionally. So when you hear Galen speaking, you'll see Mark's voice, but it really is Galen. And hopefully Mark Mutai will be able to join us. Otherwise, I'll actually be asking Galen to pinch hit. We're connecting Galen from Entebbe, Uganda, Mark Mutai from Kampala, and Nathan Dowling from Kigali, Rwanda. So we might have a few little challenges here. What I thought we'd do is, before I launch into asking Galen to tell us a little bit in detail about Jibu, I thought we would take a quick look at a great video that Jibu has from its website that really tells the Jibu story. So let me do a little technological magic here and see if this works, and hopefully you'll be able to hear and see this video.
So my name is Alfred, and I come from Eastern Uganda. During my time, with a lot of scarcity of literally everything. We had inadequate food, inadequate clothing as I grew up as a child, lack of clean drinking water, and everything was quite difficult to get by with time. And so growing up, I had just developed this hate of lack, hate of inadequacy, hate of poverty. And I think for myself, that is what has compelled me over the years. It compelled me to acquire good education, good university education. It compels my compassion, is what grants me the passion for the poor people. And it's what links me to the opportunity that Jibu gives. One of the problems that poor people are having in Kampala city alone is the inability to access water affordably.
My name is Galen Welsh. I'm the president of Jibu. Half of all water projects in the developing world fail within 2 years, primarily because there's a lack of ownership and proper incentives on the ground. Jibu is addressing the systemic roots of these issues by empowering local entrepreneurs to start their own safe drinking water franchises. So really what we're doing is decentralizing water treatment plants and mitigating the need for piped drinking water, just like cell towers erase the need for landlines for telephones.
People view us as a water company. We don't really see ourselves that way. We view ourselves as an opportunity company. What we're really excited about is creating organic growth through jobs creation in the local economy that makes a real difference in those communities. So that we're raising the economic level throughout the community by creating jobs and keeping that money in the community.
The Jibu model thrives on the fact that the young entrepreneurs are already motivated to find a job, and because they are motivated to find a job, they therefore provide a better product which is already very much needed by the market.
Jibu is one of those businesses that if you're an African, it appeals to you in the sense that you face these things on a daily basis. How is the water that you drink in your home prepared in terms of quality?
We use a 4-phase treatment process. We start with our pre-filter, and it goes through an ultrafiltration membrane, which removes all bacteria and viruses, or 99.99%. Then it goes through a carbon filter to make the taste fresh. The last phase is a chloramine injection, and it acts as a preservative in the water. So after we bottle the water and it goes to someone's home, it's less likely to be recontaminated.
I find it convenient and energy saving because we don't have to boil water anymore, and the cost is really manageable. We use like 20 liters a week, so I can't complain.
I've been using Jibu water for 3 months now, but really love the water. It's very clean water. The taste is very good, and all my friends, the visitors, whoever come around, they really appreciate it and they like it.
Over the next few years, we envision launching hundreds of franchises and reaching hundreds of thousands of people with safe water. Through that, not only will people's health increase because of access to safe water, also hundreds of local entrepreneurs will have the opportunity to start a meaningful business that generates a livelihood for them and their families, but also meets a real need in society.
So I think this is more sustainable than just money thrown out there where nobody is responsible. And lives can be transformed, and not just a few people. To provide a solution to about 510,000 people is what really drives me to be a part of what Jibu does.
All right, well, that's a great, very short opportunity to learn a little bit about Jibu, but we are really excited to have with us this morning Galen Welsh, one of the co-founders of Jibu. I'm crossing my fingers, hoping that our audio connection will be there. Can you hear me, Galen?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Fantastic, great. So we won't be able to see you, but we can definitely hear you. So what we're going to do is start the first part of our discussion about Jibu with Galen leading us through a little bit of a description of the company, how it's organized, how it's funded, how the franchise model works, and then I'll have a chance to ask Galen a few questions. So Galen, I'm going to let you take it from here, and just let me know when you want me to advance to the next slide. So,
thanks a lot, Bill. Yeah, really honored to be here and have a chance to talk to everybody a little bit about Jibu. So we founded Jibu in 2012 as a social franchise to address 2 primary issues. It's not just water that we're looking at. We're looking at the opportunity crisis and the water crisis. So in East Africa, where we're operating, there's a lack of opportunity for small and medium-sized businesses, and unemployment rates are as high as 85% among youth who we're working with. There tends to be a lack of real-life experience opportunities for young people to start developing their talents and skill sets. And a lot of times there's mom and pop shop sort of business opportunities, but not really prototypes and capital that will allow someone to start a business that can grow beyond just a mom and pop size. With the water sector, there's been gradually increasing access to water but not safe drinking water. So what Jibu's doing is taking the existing water sources that are impure and purifying them on the spot via our franchise model. So our franchises, I guess for anyone that didn't hear the audio in the video, we can go to the next slide, Jibu solution. So we equip entrepreneurs to start safe drinking water franchises. So what that means is we provide everything they need to start a business where they take water from any source, treat it, bottle it into a reusable bottle, and then sell and distribute to about a 1 kilometer radius in their neighborhood. So we provide the training, the financing, the bottles themselves, the branding, basically a turnkey business, so that they can walk in, and if they focus on sales and management of their staff, they can make it successful. So to date, we're in Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, and we have 38 franchises and about 100 micro franchises across all those countries. So we've sort of adapted the model into a hub and spoke, where we have franchisees who are treating water, selling wholesale to micro distributors who bring water a little bit closer to the neighborhoods around them. I'll keep moving rather quickly so that we can stay in line with time. So we can go on to the next slide. So the Jibu financial model, entrepreneurs co-invest upfront. And sorry for the background noise. I'm in the airport right now on a layover, so I'm trying to insulate the microphone from any of this talking. But if you can't hear me, just send me a message or shout out or something.
No problem. It's ambience. So.
Okay. Yeah, it's for real life. So our entrepreneurs co-invest. Let me just move. Sorry. Let me just move somewhere else here. So our entrepreneurs co-invest a licensing fee up front. And the reason we do that is not really for financial gain for Jibu Corporate, but so that we prove that there's skin in the game from our entrepreneurs. So once they co-invest, then we build out a full franchise. And entrepreneurs then charge about 4 to 6 cents per liter for the water they sell in the neighborhood. So it makes it cheaper than the cost of boiling, which is the primary alternative that Jibu customers are using before they start buying Jibu. So as Jibu Corporate, we've raised financing in order to purchase all these assets and do the training support and administrative support through both grants and equity investors. We had it in our first round. We had about 50% grants and 50% investors, and all of our investors are social impact investors. So they want to see a social return or social impact as well as a financial return. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So that's why we're structured as an L3C. It's a hybrid type of legal entity that basically means that we prioritize our charitable purpose above a profit-making purpose. And so it allows us to do that and insulates us from potentially having lawsuits or any sort of liability from investors if we make decisions that further our charitable mission, but not necessarily maximize profit for the company. But that being said, our investors are very much expecting a return too. So we're a true social enterprise where in the long term, we don't want to have to raise more donations in order to support the entity. We want to grow organically with profit driven from the enterprise that we can reinvest in the growth. We can go ahead to the next slide. So some of the data here is a little out of date, but it's not including Kenya either. But essentially, we are in the midst of raising a Series B round of capital, which means just our second round of financing. And this time it's a lot more equity than it is grants, because the grants sort of serve the purpose of building out some of the infrastructure we needed up front. So most of our franchises are breaking even within, I guess the average franchise is breaking even within 3 months, but it varies depending on which country we're talking about. It's very different between Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya. Franchisees the top performing franchisees can do about 6,000 or 7,000 liters a day, And at that point, then they're driving pretty significant revenue, and have a lot of them actually become business leaders and recognized community members in the city where they're operating. We can go to the next slide. So we've been planning out for our 2022 plan, and these are some of the metrics you see here are the KPIs that our impact investors and donors are expecting to see. And so we're looking at the businesses we've created, the new jobs, the consumers that we're reaching with safe water, and also CO2 saved, because we're using energy efficient ultrafiltration systems. So by providing someone with ultrafiltration treated water rather than boiled, preventing them from boiling, we're able to save a significant amount of CO2. And then we have those questions there also. So we can go on to the next slide. Can you still hear me even when the announcements are happening?
More or less.
More or less. Sorry about that. Oh man, I'm sorry. I tried to find a place not directly under one of these things, but there's no way to get away from it.
It's okay. She'll finish eventually.
Yeah, hopefully. So our just to give a snapshot of what our Series B looks like, which feeds into our expansion. In our first round, we raised about $3 million for our Series A, our first round of raise, and this time we're raising $7 million. And originally, in the plan, we were looking at some more grants in equity, but it's turned out that equity has been a bigger attraction for investors. And our goal with these funds is to start 1,000 new franchises, which will create 8,000 jobs and ultimately distribute over 500 million liters of safe water.
Wow.
And so our specific expansion plans overall, how it looks is doubling down in East Africa where we are right now, and really trying to grow out in Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya as much as possible, but then going into neighboring countries like Tanzania, Zambia, Burundi, South Sudan. And then at the same time, we're testing out a master franchise model, which is basically just franchising ourselves as Jibu corporate. So we figured out how to franchise a unit, and now we're trying to figure out sort of how to franchise the mothership itself, so we can find local investors who can spread Jibu to new environments and help to contextualize it in a smarter way than we could if we were trying to do it ourselves. So I can stop there and then sort of tease out all these other parts. I'm sure that will come up in questions.
Sure, and I want to remind everybody who's listening, we will have an opportunity at the end of the conversation to ask questions, and so I want to give you an opportunity to ask those questions now while they're in your mind by using the chat function. If you hover around the top of the screen, you should be able to find the chat box. And Bianca, that's the box we should be using, chat, right? Not Q&A?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, and so you can type in your questions, and then closer to the end of the broadcast, I will be happy to ask those questions of whoever you direct them to, or to all of the speakers in general. So, Galen, this is really impressive, really kind of exciting to see the projection ahead of where you're going, and that's obviously something we're really interested in as part of this accelerator process. It's moving Jibu into a much greater expansion in East Africa, and we're going to talk about that in a minute with Mark and with Nathan. But I want to ask you just a couple of quick questions. You on the slide, I'm going to actually back up to it here. Or maybe it's, sorry, you had talked about the social impact, and I just want to know from the standpoint of your typical investor, how important is the social impact? You said the social investors are the ones who are joining as investors of Jibu, but from your sense, how big of a deal is that for people?
Yeah, well, it's sort of, I guess it's on the spectrum. I would say for the majority of investors, it's a very big deal. But some are more concerned about the financial model and business model of it, and others are more concerned about the impact. So, I mean, I'll give an example. One of our board meetings last time, we were talking about some of the challenges we had around price point for water in Uganda and the profitability for franchisees. And some of our investors were, major advocates that we had to, slim down costs and just, increase efficiencies in the business so that we could maintain that price point. And then we had some other investors that really wanted us to subsidize the costs directly for franchisees using grant dollars. So I think that sort of illustrates some of the difference that, or some that, that they were willing to sort of sacrifice some of the financial sustainability components or push it out further in order to further the social impact up front. So for us, we always try to tread the middle where because ultimately, if we have a financial model that works, it can self-propagate through organic profits, then we can reach more people and have a bigger impact. So it's not really one or the other. It's really, we really need to make sure everything's baked in together so that we can continue to grow and not have to, forever sort of rely on donations.
And in essence, that's really the challenge of a social sector franchise, is that balance of being able to can keep the mothership sustainable and have it be profitable for franchisees, but also make sure that there's a social impact that's measurable and something that can really make a difference in people's lives. So I'm gonna pop back up to you talked about the LC. I'm looking for a slide, but I have this problem because let's see here. Sorry, I'm trying to find a slide where you had the B certification. Here it is, the impact report. So the question I want to ask is, this is the B impact report on Jibu. And I'm just curious as to how do you go about measuring social impact? Is that something you kind of do on a global basis in terms of your overall operations, is kind of look at where you are, check in on a periodic basis, or are you doing any kind of measurement on a franchisee basis? Just how does that all come about in terms of knowing that you're making some kind of an impact, other than the obvious that people drinking clean water are going to be better off than drinking dirty water? But
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So we have an impact and learning director, and he's ultimately responsible for bringing all these pieces together. But it's sort of a mix between internal metrics we're tracking. We have a sort of KPI dashboard that we share with stakeholders that tracks some of these metrics you're seeing on here, as well as others, such as what were people previously drinking before this, which type of consumers are we reaching. But then we also have, the impact report is an example of third-party evaluations. So that for the B impact report, it's sort of an in-depth audit that says, not only is our impact there and what's the quality of the impact we're making, but also how are we making that impact? So, are we paying our own staff fairly? Are we, how sustainable and environmentally friendly are we as a company in accomplishing our impact goals? And then we have other sort of third-party evaluations that happen that are funded by donors and investors. So we recently just had a Dahlberg report, for example, where they came and spent some time with us in Rwanda and just did in-depth interviews of franchisees and consumers and sort of laid that out. So it's a mixture of the internal tracking that we do to keep ourselves on track, and then these third-party evaluations to make sure that we're not off base.
great. And then before I bring in Nathan and Mark, one last question. You're in an expansion phase. You're currently in Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya. What are, if you can look down the road, 5 years, what is the trajectory in terms of where Jibu wants to go for its expansion?
Sure, yeah. So, well, in the coming year, we're looking at 28 franchises in Rwanda, 18 in Uganda, and 12 more in Kenya, and then a pilot in Tanzania and potentially Zambia. and that's just for this coming year. But in this round of financing, we're planning on it being the final round of fundraising we ever do, as far as it being equity and grants. And from here on out, we think we can have the cash flow where we could raise debt instruments to fuel expansion. So this will get us to 1,000 franchises globally. That's the ultimate target with our, well, it's essentially a 7-year plan. So we're shooting for the stars, and our traction to date is certainly picking up and impressive, but we still have a long ways to go, and a key to reaching that metric will be the master franchise model working, because the scalability of a master franchise model is much greater than sort of how we've done it to date with launching ourselves in each new country. So if we can have a local investor who brings his own resources and contextualizes it to new environments, then we can accelerate at a much quicker basis.
That's great. Very, very exciting. Well, thank you, Galen. If you hang out, I'm sure there'll be some questions for you, but mute your mic so we won't have to hear about every flight leaving Entebbe. That'd be great. So now I'm really, really happy to bring in Mark Mutai. He's the director of the Uganda branch of country director of Jibu, Uganda, and also Nathan Dowling, who is the country director for Rwanda. I don't see Nathan necessarily on my screen, so he could or could not be there, but we'll start with Mark. How are you, Mark? Uh-oh, we can't hear Mark.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Try again.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Okay, sorry. We were a little bit of a wonky connection there. Okay. So, Mark, Jibu has been in Uganda for maybe 4 years now. Is that correct? Oh, sorry, Mark. We cannot hear you.
So, sorry, can you hear me?
Now we can. I don't know what you did different, but keep doing it.
Okay, I got rid of my headset.
Okay, that's it. So, did you hear my question?
Yes, so I was saying, Jibu has been in Uganda for about almost 3 years now, but I'd say effectively we kicked off operations at the beginning of 2015 when we had all our registration and our scale plan starting to take off. So it's almost about 2 years old operationally, although prior to that, we were sort of tinkering with the model and getting everything set up.
And how is Jibu establishing itself as a brand in Uganda? Are you moving franchises beyond Kampala to smaller cities? Are you seeing Jibu jugs popping up around the country? What's the kind of penetration?
Yeah, so to date we have 14 franchises up and ready to go. We have them functioning right now and fully operational. Our growth plans for the year of 2017 is to open 1 franchise a month for the first half of the year, and then 2 franchises a month, so working out a total of 18 by the end of the year. Right now, most of our franchises are pretty much within Kampala, which is the capital city, and we have them in different, I'd call them like suburbs of the city, and some of them are within like the CBD itself. Our plan this year is to expand further into what we're calling the tier 2 cities. So these are peri-urban areas that are a bit of a distance from the city, from the main city, Kampala. We have one set up right now in the southwest corner of the country, which is about 4 hours away. But beyond the actual franchises, we have what we call micro franchises, which are pretty much small outlets that are branded and where you pick up water. The only difference is they don't have the actual purification unit. So these micro franchises are in very many parts of the city and all over the place. So in terms of like brand awareness, as you drive around the city, you'll see Jibu everywhere. Sometimes for the average consumer, you might not tell the difference between the actual franchise or the micro franchise, although there's a difference in the size of the store. But the brand is starting to pop up and get really big. And as we do that, in terms of growing our brand, not only are we trying to have like an actual physical presence, but also trying to standardize and maintain our brand promise, which is affordable water at a quality water at an affordable price. So as we continue to grow and scale, we're trying to continue to make sure that we maintain that promise with our consumers, And the customers have a standardized experience when they go from store to store. They'll pay a uniform price. They'll get the same level of customer service, and there will not be a difference in the water quality.
That's great. I've done a lot of work in Africa, and one of the things you don't see very much in Africa are franchises. It's just something that hasn't happened a lot in most of the continent, South Africa being the exception. But so you're in an area where the franchising model is something that is a new concept. What kind of difference does that make? Does that make it easier or make it harder, or is it kind of neutral in terms of introducing the idea of having multiple franchisees that carry out Jibu's work?
Actually, I'd say it's sort of a mixed bag. It makes it easier in the sense that the model and the concept gets met with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. On the flip side, though, because we don't have a lot of franchising happening. So in Uganda, for instance, I think the most established franchise is Yum Foods, the guys of KFC, who've only been around for under a year now. And prior to that, we have some gas stations, Total and Shell and the big oil players, although even they own a lot of corporate-owned stores. But either way, one of the challenges that we run up against is just a lack of precedence, which causes a lack of understanding of the model, especially from regulators. We haven't had that challenge yet, but we can see it coming up, which is, in some cases, even internally within our own franchisees, there seems to be an understanding that what we're operating are actually corporate-owned branches, and nobody seems to quite know how to either enforce contracts, what that means in terms of, tax liabilities, in terms of expectations on who's responsible for what. So while we are sort of pioneers in this field, especially the social enterprise space, which we are for sure, that excitement is also matched with some anxiety around the fact that there's not a lot of people who know how this thing should actually work. But that is more reason for us to keep doing it, and we're excited to see where it goes. I mean, if we are the trailblazers that set up that standard, that works for us. But yeah, definitely at this stage, I would say that a lack of the model itself can create both exciting opportunities but also challenges.
That's great. Well, you definitely are trailblazers, and probably will have an opportunity to influence the regulatory process as it goes forward. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate you joining us. And as I said to Galen, stick around. I'm sure folks will have some questions in a few minutes here. I'd like to turn to Galen in Kigali if he is connected. I don't see him in my box of people who are here, so that may. You are excellent. Okay, good. Nathan, Rwanda is a virgin territory for Jibu. You've only been there how long so far?
Well, so Jibu opened simultaneously in Uganda and in Rwanda, so we're at the same length of time there. I've joined Jibu just recently, and I'm working on the expansion process at this next phase.
Okay, great. Okay, I was sorry, I was under the thinking that it was newer than Uganda, so it was basically started at the same time. But you are now expanding the number of franchisees in Kigali and then beyond. What's the plan for expansion in Rwanda?
Well, we're trying to identify the kind of the urban centers that can actually support this type of business, and so we do this through a model, like Mark was saying, with the micro franchises. So it's a way for us to test kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. So micro franchise will open. They're the ones that really drive the marketing, the relationship building, and all of the customer service. And then when they're becoming more and more successful, we can track that, and then to a point where, okay, now that you've proven yourself and shown that you're loyal to this brand and you're really moving this business forward, then we'll come in and look at doing it like co-investment with making them an actual franchise. So we're doing, it's about, I would say, a little bit more focus on the secondary tier cities now, with Kigali being fairly well developed. We're going to definitely be pushing and making sure that the idea of Jibu should be available to every kind of area within Rwanda, kind of across the country.
And I know you're new, so I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, but compared to, and Mark can chime in here if he wants, obviously Rwanda is a much smaller country, geographically less area to cover, but in some ways does it make it easier because of the kind of infrastructure and compactness to be able to look at actually being able to have Jibu be a countrywide brand? Is that something you're hoping to do, or are you focusing on the larger towns and cities?
Well, because of the size, I think if you compare it to a state, it'd be about the size of Massachusetts. So we can actually kind of expand throughout the entire country fairly easily. The longest drive from Kigali would be about 6 hours is the absolute max. And that's mostly just because of the windy roads. So we're able to kind of, from a central hub within Kigali to really hit all of those secondary markets. And then each franchise then sets up resellers that kind of go into the more, the different areas, so that it's not only going to the franchise, but it's also going to these micro franchises set up in partnerships.
Great. You probably know a fair amount of your franchisees and micro franchisees, and I was wondering if there was one particular entrepreneur that that sticks out, someone that you could tell us a little bit about in terms of the profile of the kinds of people that decide to be associated with Jibu and take this on as an enterprise.
There's a new franchisee. He was a micro franchise up until middle of December. A guy named Jackson that was able to, he had a micro franchise that was just spectacular. He was out in the communities, he was building their relationships. His marketing was absolutely where we want everyone to be. And finally got to a point where it said, you need a territory for yourself, and here's your franchise agreement. And he bought in, and he went from zero to one of our better performing franchises in weeks. And that's the kind of potential that Jibu has, because if you want to spend the time and make the work, you can actually move this very quickly. Whereas, within weeks, you have a sustainable business versus a lot of other businesses, you don't expect to actually make a return on an investment within the first year.
That's great. So it's his motivation and his organization and then responding to the opportunity, and that's boosting him to become a full franchisor and franchisee and moving from micro to full. That's really excellent. It's great to hear. Well, thank you, Nathan. It's great for you to be able to connect with us. As I've said to the other gentlemen, please hang around. I see a bunch of questions are starting to roll in, but I want to switch gears from East Africa to the central part of the United States, actually Houston, to talk to Peter Holt for a couple of minutes here. We just to be clear about the living case study model. We're very pleased to have a partnership with the International Franchise Association's Social Sector Task Force. And the Social Sector Task Force has a mentoring program that is really pretty unique, being able to take really top leaders in the franchise field and make them available to people like Mark, who is our protege in this Living Case Study Accelerator, and give them one-on-one opportunities in the case with our Living Case Study Accelerator, about a 8 or 9 month process of being able to first meet in New Hampshire as part of a solutions iteration process where we look at critical issues, we identify where the growth opportunities are, set a plan, set of action steps, and then over several months, the mentor and the protege work together. In this case, Peter Holt. Peter has a long history of franchising and has recently taken over as the CEO of a company called The Joint, which is focused on the chiropractic field. So Peter, really happy to have you joining us early in the morning from Houston, Texas. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, Bill. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. So Peter, as a franchise expert and mentor, how do the issues that Jibu has confronted in East Africa compare to establishing franchises in the U.S.?
Well, this is what I find so interesting and so powerful and actually quite profound is that that business model of franchising really almost transfers in any kind of market that you're looking at. So as we're talking about some of the challenges that we face in terms of creating and building a franchise system, making sure that you have your operating model in place, making sure that you have the system to be able to transfer the technology of your operating model to a franchisee, focusing on, okay, how do I qualify franchisees? How do I create lead generation activities for new franchisees coming in? How do I make sure that I'm getting the quality that I'm setting out as a structure that translate across my network? And how do I motivate franchisees to become even better? How do I deal with my franchisees that aren't performing? And that what's so interesting is all the challenges that we're facing with Jibu are no different from any startup franchise, whether it's in Boise, Idaho, or in Tempe, and so that this is what's so powerful about this model is how it transcends in a way time and culture in terms of the development of the utilization of franchising as the methodology of expansion.
That's great. It's really, really exciting to hear. I mean, we're really talking about the possibility of using franchising anywhere. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out the challenges of the particular context and market you're in. And related to that, Peter, from your experience, how does Jibu stack up against other franchises you've worked with? And how does the social impact aspect make a difference in how the franchise operation is organized?
Well, kind of two things here. And I'd say certainly if we look at specifically and purely from the perspective of comparing Jibu to other social franchise concepts, I would say that they're one of the leaders in the field. I think that they've had, right from the beginning, they've had some remarkable management. They've been able to raise some funds to really be able to experiment and develop their model. That they are, if you just look at who else out there is doing what they're doing in that with the utilization of this business format franchise system. So it's not simply where we're taking kind of elements of franchising, and I've heard it described some ways as called fractional franchising, in the sense that, okay, I'm going to take some of the elements common to a franchise model, a shared brand, operating model, training operation program, so they can create some sense of continuity of program, but just taking elements of it without that full robustness model that ultimately makes it self-sustaining. And so I would say that Jibu is certainly one on the leading edge of starting out from that social sector franchise perspective to develop a robust franchise or business format model in obviously multiple countries. The second part of your question was?
Well, just how is it different in terms of organizing a social franchise, as opposed to a franchise that doesn't have a social mission, or is there much of a difference?
Well, and this is what's so interesting, and this is actually why I've stayed involved in franchising for 30 years, is that the very structure of franchising is it's based on this triple bottom line in a way. Because if you really think about franchising, is that for it really to function, you have to have all the parties on the same side. So this isn't like, oh my gosh, the franchisor is in conflict with the franchisee, which is in conflict with the consumer. Is that for franchising to work and work successfully, whether it's a social sector franchise or a business format franchise, is whatever product or service you're delivering to the consumer has to be relevant to them and at a cost and affordability for them. The franchisee, if they're not learning this model quickly, developing it, making money, surviving, then guess what? The franchisor doesn't survive. And so what happens is the very structure of a franchise relationship most times has all the parties on the same side of the table. So you're not in a direct conflict with, okay, every time that I do something that that benefits the franchisor, that in fact could be hurting the franchisee. Now we can do things like that from time to time, but very basic structure of business format franchising requires you to make sure that your franchisees understand the model, learn the model, and use it in a profitable manner. So that is exactly what a social sector franchise business model has to do. So that we're not taking a concept that's in conflict with our end result, that you're using the business format franchise model, which is so intimately tied to this concept of a triple bottom line. So it's made for it, which is so exciting, which is why I participate in programs like this and work with companies like Jibu.
Excellent. I have one more question, but I just want to point out on the screen here, we actually have a screenshot of the Social Sector Task Force mentor page. And if we have any franchisors who are listening out there, experienced people who are interested in possibly being a mentor with the Social Sector Task Force program, then there is a application actually in the bottom of this page. We'll put those links up when we put the recording up of the webinar, but by all means, if you're interested, you can talk to Marla Rosner, who works in coordinating this really fabulous program, and she'll help you. So Peter, let me ask you this final question. What motivates you to be a mentor, and would you encourage other franchise professionals to serve as mentors?
Well, this is the answer is we're going back to the core concept of franchising. If you really think about how a franchise system works, it's actually a mentor relationship. Because what we're saying is, what does mentoring mean? Is what you're saying is, I have experience that I am going to transfer to somebody else for the benefit of both parties. And it's a very mutual relationship. It's like a franchisee and a franchisor. They don't work, if they're not working together, there's no concept. It doesn't work if you don't have a group of franchisees that your franchisor is leading. So this whole idea of mentoring is the same thing. It's kind of this giving back. It's the same of the concept of franchising. So what is franchising? I have so many different ways I describe franchising. And one of the ways that I would describe franchising is the business of selling mistakes. Now, another way that you can talk about mentoring. What's mentoring? Everybody knows it. It's like parenting. What do you do when you're trying to help your children to grow them, to take their values, to be, to live a good life? Is that you're saying, listen, I made these mistakes and I don't want you to make them. And so that you, in a way, mentoring your children, but of course they never listen because they're going to go out and do their own thing.
Right.
It's kind of the same relationship. And so mentoring is that same place where you are in the business of sharing your mistakes with a young person or a young company to help them minimize the mistakes that you've already made so they can go on and make their own and be stronger for it. And so that, again, franchising by its very nature is really, if you think about it, is an accelerated structure of mentoring to help that franchisee operate effectively, quickly, and profitably in the shortest period of time.
Great. In this case, you know that Mark will probably do everything you say, unlike children. So, well, great. We have, just to give you a little bit of a time update, we are a little behind because we started off a little late because of the technical difficulty. So if you'll hang with us, we do have a number of questions here. And I know that in Galen's case, he might have to jump on a flight, but what I want to do is get into the questions here. So I'm just going to, unless the question has been directed at any one of you, I'll direct it to all of you, and then whoever wants to can unmute your mic and pop in and answer it. So first question is from Riley Marks, and question is, how do you control for quality and ensure quality standards are met across the franchise? This is a multi-part question, so you might want to write this down. How do you handle your supply chain, and what challenges have you encountered related to supply chain, and what solutions have to be employed?
Well, I can jump in. For us, we work pretty closely with the regulators, obviously, to make sure that the quality standards are at least what the government looks for. We have a technical team at the corporate level that goes, troubleshoots, diagnoses, and is available to all the different franchises. So it's kind of a way of, we have the team that is then able to respond to all the problems or potential issues in quality, and we maintain that the quality standards are high, the highest possible. And then, like for our supply chain, we essentially have a kind of global supply chain director that is sourcing all of the different bottles and materials and different things, and then distributing throughout the 3 franchise markets at the moment.
And to add to that too, I would say with the quality control, one of the biggest components is actually the human capacity development with the operators themselves in each franchise. So one of the things we really focus on is training the production managers in the production rooms to really know what they're doing. And so we have different certification levels that authorizes them to do different troubleshooting activities. But that's really the key to enabling us to keep our costs low with a relatively small technical team, but also be assured of quality across the board. So, and supply chain too. One piece to add is we're sourcing primarily in East Africa. We've been able to identify vendors who can manufacture the reusable bottles and labels and all the parts locally. So we're trying to drive down costs that way. And ultimately, it's one of the benefits we offer to our franchisees because we're able to get economies of scale as we're sourcing for all the franchisees at once.
Great, thank you. Well, here are a couple of questions that are very closely related. So this is actually from David Koch. How much turnover of franchises have you had? And from Cynthia Eldridge, what is the attrition rate of franchisees? Are there examples of quality concerns that led to defranchising?
I can speak to that specific to Uganda. So in Uganda, we've actually, over the time we've been in operations, we've actually only lost one franchisee. This was as recent as last November. Incidentally, this is actually the first franchisee in our network. And at the time of his departure, we've sort of mutually agreed to part ways. And I think a lot of it simply had to do with the change of sort of the demographic and profile of the business. As we got older, we got more standardized, we got more people on board. And I think this particular franchisee was started to feel sort of burned out in terms of, all the expectations that we're putting on franchises now. And they decided that it was time for them to move on to a different type of business. So it was a very amicable separation. We actually took back control of those franchises. So we did not close the stores. We took them on as corporate-owned stores. We maintained all his staff, and we just, standardized operations better. And now we're in the process of spinning those off to other new franchises within the network. So in terms of the store count, we didn't have to close a store. We just lost like one franchise owner. In terms of quality concerns and around defranchising, as I mentioned, we haven't had to cancel or pull a franchise license in Uganda yet. We definitely had some concerns around quality in situations where, the person is understaffed, or he has some quality issues that our team has been able to identify before they've led to concerns that will directly affect customers. But we haven't gotten to a position yet where we've had to actually lose a franchisee specific to quality. I'll let Ethan speak to the situation one.
And I'll continue on with the similar vein. This is actually from Drew Conroy, who is a UNH faculty member. How does Jibu compare in price to Inyange water in Rwanda?
Our prices are they're cheaper on a whole, but usually about, say, 70% of the price of the mineral water in Inyange. They're not really our focused market. Our goal is to stop people from boiling water and giving them an alternative. So we're not trying to really compete with other bottling companies or other mineral waters. Our focus is really on kind of the people who can't afford their prices.
Okay, and a follow-up question that Drew had was, how does Inyange, being backed by the government of Rwanda, view this competition?
We have a fairly good relationship with them. Obviously, it is a bit of a competition, although we don't really focus on that. But we have had several meetings where they understand what we're doing and how we're, where we're focused versus where they're focused, and we've had no real run-ins or any issues with them.
And I think the real main alternative to Jibu is boiled water, and like Nathan said, we're 70%.
Oh, Galen, we lost you. Right on the 70% there.
Well, 70% of the cost, the focus is still to kind of bring the water price to a point where these guys can move from boiled water to packaged water that has a little bit more higher quality standards.
Right. And boiled water is always the cost of the fuel and the inconvenience of it and everything else. So Julie McBride has asked a whole slew of questions here. I don't know if I can get to them all, but let's get into them. First question she asks is, how do you manage growth in a way that ensures you maintain value while keeping your costs under control?
I don't know if Galen's still on there, but I can take that question. So, once we assign new franchises, we give them a territory. So they have a radius within which they operate. So as we're opening up new stores, we try to be mindful that we're not causing any territorial encroachment issues, so that we know that the franchise that has already been established has a big enough market share that the business can actually be sustainable and profitable. In terms of cost, I think a lot of it is tied to our supply chain. We know that a lot of franchises are going to see growth in their business as the store count continues to grow organically. And as that happens, as Galen was talking about our economies of scale, we're getting to a place now where we've standardized a lot of things. We've simplified our processes. So just an example that comes to mind, in the past, we were handling all our build out. So what happens when we find an ideal location is we have an actual build out process where we'll get contractors in to do all kinds of work. So around painting and plumbing and the branding and all this. So because we have so many stores opening up so quickly, we've actually managed to standardize this process where we have one master contractor. This has brought down our cost. This has simplified the process. This has standardized the work. We work with the same people over and over. As we've gotten more stores open, now we know the requirements of the regulators that Nathan was referring to. And so we find ourselves in a situation now where, for every other store we open, it's not as costly as it was, say, 10 stores before.
Excellent. I'm going to ask a few more of Julie's questions. Just want to give everybody a time check. It's about 2 minutes before the top of the hour, and I'm going to run this webinar just till 5 past, so another 5 or 6 minutes, but I think these questions are important, so if you can hang out with us, please do. How do you deal with fake Jibus in the market? Has that been an issue?
This is actually something that's kind of just started to pop up for us in Rwanda, partly because of the penetration, and people started to see this as very oh, look, this is a successful business. We're starting to see a couple different people try to pop up and do not necessarily our model, but they definitely are trying to utilize some of the good branding that we've done. Here in Rwanda, we work pretty closely with the government, and they actually have an intellectual property department in the development board that we've worked very closely with to kind of communicate, why this is an issue and why that we don't want to have customers confused and be able to kind of allow them to operate. We don't mind competition, but we want to make sure that that standards are there and that people aren't damaging our brand.
Great. I'm going to come back to a couple of Julie's questions, but I wanted to get in a question by Anna Gerard. Who are your customers? Are they urban poor, and are they new users to purchasing water?
Mostly it would be new users purchasing water. So we've seen kind of from baseline studies we took when they first started to now, we've seen kind of a marked decrease in the amount of people who boil water. Which corresponds to our increase in sales. So we're trying to really focus on this decentralized model where we've got these franchise and micro franchises in the communities within walking distance, and there's the people there are starting to realize that it's actually costs less than the charcoal that they're spending to boil water. So we're seeing like we're actually meeting the social impact goals, and we're trying to track that throughout the entire process.
That's great. And these questions might probably be for Galen, but the three last questions I'm going to combine from Julie is how has the profile of the company changed? How has the company culture changed over time as you've grown? And how has the investor profile changed over time? And how do you attract investors now versus initially? And last question, how do you help initial investors mitigate risks? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting these questions mixed up. Let me start all over again. Let's just start with how has the culture of Jibu changed over time?
I think I could speak to probably the first two questions, the culture and the franchisees. I think internally what has happened and what we see going on is as time has gone on, internally we've gotten more intentional about the type of people we add onto our team in terms of mission fit, but also, being an early stage company, what you find a lot in this sort of the employment environment in Uganda is there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of uncertainty, lack of process, and all these things, and which is typical. However, you don't have very many early stage companies doing what we're trying to do, especially in the social enterprise space. So so what has happened with our recruitment is we're focused more on trying to find individuals with as best as we can that have some of those attributes that will fit with sort of the mission and the style of the company. We've definitely grown a lot. I'm getting more experienced around franchising as a model, and so now what's happening? Our relationship even with the franchisees has changed a lot more now, where we sort of have like a collaborative partnership. As I was mentioning in the past, because of a lack of precedence, they seem to be a tendency of them operating as branches of corporate and not understanding who's supposed to play what role. But now, you can definitely see, even when you're around the office or around the franchisees, there's definitely more clarity coming out in terms of what's our expectation of them and the expectation of us, and where do our different roles stop. In terms of the franchisees, and this is more specific to Uganda, just simply based on like the age demographics of our country, but also the employment situation, we have a lot of people that are pseudo entrepreneurs, and with a business like ours, it's pretty easy to attract some of these individuals who don't seem to have either the right level of business experience / discipline / I'd say incentives or reasons why they'd be interested in business like this. So again, as we've grown and started to recruit more and more franchisees, at one point in Uganda, we actually actively slowed down on our expansion just to make sure that we're being very mindful that the people getting into the network have all the tools they need to be successful. But with as much as we can, we try to vet them a little bit more, try to do a little bit more due diligence on these individuals. So the new franchisees we're bringing on have a little bit higher caliber in terms of business experience, access to working capital, their own personal networks, and the ability to run the business. And now we're getting better at knowing, we're getting better. We're not at where we want to be, but we're getting definitely much better at understanding what kind of personal profile probably has the highest probability of success, simply because we know that we need that to protect the brand and to grow the rest of the franchises in the network.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark. I'm actually going to hold off on the rest of Julie's questions because I'm going to promo something here in a minute to let you know how we can get those questions answered. But I first of all just want to really thank Mark and Galen and Nathan and Peter for being able to join us here from all your different locations. The Jibu story is really amazing. We were in this wonderful catbird seat at UNH. We have a student actually visiting Kigali right now, Elena Drew, who is helping to write this case study. So we really get an opportunity to learn in detail about what Jibu is doing. But it's really an exemplary model of what can be accomplished through social sector franchising, and we really appreciate your time to be with us today. I want to let folks know that we're going to continue talking about Jibu in February. We are working on a webinar which currently has the title Investing for Multi-Bottom Line Impact for Social Sector Franchising. It'll be a month from now on Wednesday, February 15th, and we're tentatively working on a plan to have Julie McBride be our guest moderator, and to have 2 or 3 different guests, including Brandy Welsh, who's the co-founder with Galen of Jibu. And I'm excited because it gives us an opportunity to really delve deeply into what is going on in terms of the thinking of how do investors get attracted to being involved with social sector franchising, what kind of impact investors come into participation with companies like Jibu, and what are some of the challenges around that. So we'll have some great guests, great opportunity to talk about this in more detail. Julie can actually ask Randy those questions directly that she asked in our chat box. I want to remind everybody that this is recorded, so that if you didn't have a chance to see the whole thing, or if you wanted to pass it along to someone else, the recording will be up in within a day. Just come back to the social sector franchise webinar page, and we'll be able to give you the link to hear the recording or see the recording. Again, I want to thank everybody for participating in this first webinar of the Living Case Study Accelerator process as a part of the work that the Center for Social Innovation Enterprise is doing at UNH. And I wish everybody a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you, and take care.